I can usually stand up and kind of recite things, and if the words are a bit shit, I can let my passion for what I'm saying kind of make up for the fact that the writing might be instinctive but a bit sloppy, etc. So I have to read it off the page, which is not quite as prophetic as I like it to be, but I'm going to just read it off the page. I'm going to do it. It's really lovely that you're here. I was just saying to my friend that I feel like a child at a dinner party for adults. I don't know, so given that, do you know what imagine how, do you know what I mean? Where's all the pink wafers? I know. Alright, so I'm actually like 25 years old, it's alright. This is my piece. It goes like this. In the old days, when our souls were still young, the myths were the stories we used to explain ourselves. But how can we explain the way we hate ourselves? What we've made ourselves into, the way we break ourselves into, the way we overcomplicate ourselves. But I swear we are still mythical. We are still permanently trapped somewhere between the heroic and the pitiful. We are still godly, and that makes us monstrous. But we are much more than the sum of the things that belong to us. You see, the empty skies, they rise over the benches where the old men sit. They are desolate, friendless, and the young men spit. They are courageous and restless. These are our heroes. These are our legends. In a city that forges them just to forget them, you might be sat in her bedroom and she'll look like a painting. And one touch of her skin and you'll feel like you're fainting. Look, the myths in this city, they are all saying the same thing about how we all need a place to belong and how we all need to struggle to tell what's right from what's wrong, and we all need to know which side we are. We all want to love and be loved and keep going, but there's no monsters to kill no more. There's no dragon's teeth left for the sowing. There is only the flowing of rain down the gutters. There is only the muttering nutters. There is only the end of the world and the touch of our lovers and the hunger of the kid who ain't got nothing in his cupboards. Footsteps in the hall while she clutches her covers. The heel of his hand as it smothers. The tears of our mothers. The deaths of our sisters and brothers. They are out fighting wars for a cause that disgusts us. As the first night you felt yourself shudder. Your hearts opened up. You were alone with each other. You see, all that we have here is all that we've always have. We have jealousy, tenderness, tempers, and gifts. Look, the plight of a people who've forgotten their myths and imagine that now is all that there is a sorry plight, all isolation and worry. But the life in your veins, it is godly, heroic. You were born for greatness, mate. Believe it, fucking know it. You can see it in the tears of the poets. Look, there's always been scumbags, just like there's always been villains. And there's always been heroes rotting in prisons. And there's always been death in the lives of the living. And there's always been parents who would die for their children. The stories are there if you listen. The stories are here. The stories are you. And your fears and your hopes are as old as the language of smoke, the language of blood, the language of languishing love. The gods are all here. The gods are in us. You see, the gods are in the betting shop. The gods are at the cafe. The gods are watching telly in their flats. The gods are in the office blocks. The gods are at their desks. The gods are in the toilets having unprotected sex. The gods are at the rave. The gods are 2 pills deep into dancing and now they're in the alleyways laughing. The gods are at the doctors trying to get a little something for the stress. The gods are at the bar in a mess. And then the gods are in the supermarket and the gods are walking home. The gods can't stop checking Facebook on their phones. The gods are in a traffic jam. The gods are on the train. The gods are watching adverts. The gods are not to blame. The gods are working for the council and now they're on a dole. And now they're getting drunk, pissing their wages down a hole. The gods are in their gardens and they're pulling up their plants. The gods are in the classrooms. The gods don't stand a chance. Bright sunlight through his windscreen as Brian drives home. Leaves Jane sleeping in the hotel bed. Now his keys in the door, wife's shoes on the floor, son playing war games on the carpet. He's bored of his life. He stares at his wife. She's got a question on her lips, but she knows not to ask it. But here it is. Where have you been? Eyes full of dread and jealousy. Brian takes off his boots and he sits down heavily. Out, he says. She stares. Out where? Just out, he says. Do we have to? Prayers are not spoken in silence so total. Don't push me, he says. And she knows to leave him be. So she gets up slowly. 3 souls under one roof, all lonely. Because Brian shouts at Mary, then Mary shouts at little Clive, and Clive shouts at his toys and makes them all dive to their death out his window. Well, up the road at number 23, Kevin's up early, staring out his window at the cherry tree that grows across the road in the cemetery, wondering where his wife is. She's in the hotel still, waking up gently, reaching for Brian, but the bed's cold, sitting up with a start when the shame takes hold. See, gradually something had changed. And now Brian can barely bring himself to say his wife's name. You see, he feels stifled and she feels drained. And every day goes past the same, because they're fucking bored, sick to death of each other's expressions. The tone of his voice makes her shudder, makes her want to run away, and she can't really remember things ever having been another way. She stares at him, looking for heat, but it leaves her feeling cold. And little Clive's barely even 2 years old. Meanwhile, down the road at number 23, Kevin's been beaming since Jane told him about her pregnancy. He figures that's what was causing the strange atmosphere, and I was reading all them birthing books and saving up for all the gear, and they're getting on better, it's going to be a good year. And the day comes at last, and the skies are cold and clear. He was born in the hospital in winter at dawn, with a full head of hair and eyes that were warm and inquisitive, the colour of skies in the middle of a storm. With deliberate patience, the boy grew, going through the kind of everyday things, like everyday people do. You see, working out right from wrong, it ain't easy. When there's no justice, when there's no morals, when everything's weighed on the scales of profit, it can be hard for a young man to grow up honest. His name's Thomas. He's got a passion for comics. His dad's his hero. He always lets him win at Sonic. His mum teaches classes down at Lewisham College. Tommy's a good kid, shows a lot of promise. But it's the holidays that hurt her the most. Watching Kevin play with Tommy in the garden, squirting each other with the hose. Because she can see it in her boy's eyes. She can hear it when her boy cries, but she can't even begin to imagine how she would apologize. Meanwhile, Mary stares out the window of the bus. She's got the shopping in the bags. All she can hear is the buzz of the city. She feels sick. She feels like a piece of dust on the edge of a tabletop, threatened by every gust. The flat's in a state, but she can't bear to mop the floor or put the bins out, so she just stares at the TV. She pours herself a vodka in a teacup. She's put on weight. She's miserable. She knows that she should clean up the flat, but instead she's getting pissed on her own watching the chat shows. She puts a pizza in the microwave and she eats it off her knees. She chain smokes, drinking till she starts to feel queasy. When little Clive gets home from school, she's still there, fast asleep. He looks around the kitchen for something he can eat. Can't find nothing, so he goes out to walk the streets. See, because Clive's a little rotter. He's mean to his schoolmates. He's always causing bother, always giving someone grief. He starts off nicking dinner money, then he nicks a bike, then he nicks a kitchen life and holds up the corner shop for sweets. Tough nut. Never got enough love. Grew up in a house where his mum and dad never said a word to each other except when they was fighting. That's how he learned that if you got something to say, you better say it with violence. So now Clive's outside, kicking a ball against the wall, feeling bored and angry. And this kid comes along, he's kind of tall and gangly. He nods at Clive. Clive stares at him. Says, what? The kid nods at the ball and says, oh, let me have a shot. Let's play penalties. No, says Clive. My name's Terry, says Terry, tackling the ball off of him and then passing it back. And they spent a couple hours like that, until Terry's nan came out and shouted at him that it's dinner time. Terry says, oh, I've got to go inside, but if you want, you can come to mine. I don't know if you're hungry. Clive looks at him briefly like it's from another country. Then he picks up his ball and says, all right then, cool. And that's it. Terry was Clive's first real mate, and he cared about him, although he'd never tell it to his face. So one day they're around at Terry's, they're watching X-Men on the telly. Terry says to Clive, mate, if you could be anything in this world when you grow up, what would you be? I don't want to be nothing, says Clive, staring at the TV. Me, says Terry, I want to be a fireman. Clive ignores him, but Terry keeps talking. I want to save people's lives and that. Rescue ladies from burning buildings and carry their babies down the ladders while their children cheer for me at the bottom. What do you think? Clive takes a lighter from his pocket and he fiddles with the flint. He screws up some paper and he throws it in the bin. Terry keeps talking, don't notice anything. Going down the hose when the bell goes. Be wicked, wouldn't it? Clive lights the paper and he gets the bin burning. When he sees that it's blazing, he puts it underneath the curtain. Suddenly Terry sees the fire, says, "What the fuck, man, what are you doing?" Clive stands up, looks him in the eye and says to him, "Go on then, put it out." Runs through the door and he holds it shut behind him. Terry stands there fucking freaking out, silent. He looks around panicking, he picks up a can of Coke, he throws it on the flame, they just hiss and spit at him. He can't understand why any of this has happened. The fire looks massive to him. The curtains are roaring. He tries to throw a blanket on the flames, but he ends up just falling and getting caught in the curtain. He's stuck, and the fire's getting worse, and it's burning, and something's on his neck, and it's hurting, and he's shouting, but nobody ain't heard him, because nobody's coming. And then he starts to cry, but then suddenly he opens his eyes and sees Clive. Clive's got a bucket of water in his hand, and he throws it at the wall, tears the burning curtains down, and stamps the flames until they're small enough to smother. Then for a moment, they look at each other. "My face," says Terry. "It hurts." Clive leads him out of the house with some reassuring words. "Don't worry, mate. Could have been a lot worse." He puts his arm around his shoulder and sits with him on the curb. In the hospital ward, Terry's taking off his bandages. Clive's at the foot of the bed eating all his tangerines, flicking through his magazines. Terry's nan's in the corridor talking to the nurse. Clive's looking at Terry. Says, "Oh, does it still hurt?" "No," says Terry. "No, not much." He's got a scar up his neck that looks like his jaw's being clutched by a clawed hand. Terry says, "I don't know what you're doing here anyway. I don't want to be your mate no more." "Ah, come on, Terry," says Clive. "You know what I did it for, right?" "No," says Terry, "and I don't want to know either." "I was doing you a favour, mate." "How?" "You set my room on fire." Well, you'll never make it as a fireman if you're scared of a blaze like that. You won't be no good to anybody stranded in a flat. I was only trying to help you, get you prepared. I didn't mean to hurt you. I didn't think you'd be so scared." "I weren't scared," says Terry. And for a moment, he just sat there and stared. "Maybe you was only trying to help. And yeah, maybe I'll be a shit fireman and I'll only hurt myself." Underneath the hospital lights, the scar was lit up brighter than the rest of his skin, shining like it was still on fire. "Stop looking at it," said Terry, and his voice sounded tighter than usual. "It's pretty cool," said Clive. "It looks just like a spider." And so as they grew older, Spider and Clive spent every day side by side. They wear the same jacket. They walk with the same stride. When Clive gets in trouble, Spider's never far behind. But then one day, Spider's seen this girl he liked, like a really smart girl who wants to put the world to rights. She's doing A-levels. She's going to go uni. Spider says to Clive, "Man, how the fuck am I going to get her talking to me? I don't know what to say to her. Every time I fucking see her, I feel stupid." "You ain't stupid, Spider," says Clive. "Just go on, go and do it. Go and talk to her. I don't know, ask her how she is. Go on, mate, do it now." And Clive shoves him in the shoulder with an affectionate fist. Spider's nodding his head frantically. He's walking over casually, hands in his pockets. And with his best gravelly voice, he says, "All right, what's your name?" She says, "Gemma." And he feels the whole world change at the sound of her voice. He stands there for a second. "Cool. Gemma, do you want to, I don't know, smoke a fag or whatever?" She giggles. She's never seen a stranger or more desolate fella. Poor Gemma, she can hardly hold her shit together. She grips her best mate Gloria by the arm and they burst out laughing. And as they walk off, Spider feels like a dick for even asking. Gripped by an anger and a sadness that is new to him, he goes and finds Clive, and for once Clive doesn't stick the boot in him. Instead he says, "Spider mate, people are muck. You either fuck them or they fuck you up. It's you and me, pal. We don't need girls or anyone. Me and you are tougher than everyone." Tommy's 18. Walking around in a daydream, trying to work out what the fuck he's meant to do with his life. He's a passionate painter. He draws all through the night, but he keeps it to himself. He doesn't show nobody else. He's writing stories, like comic book style. He's making drawings. His hero is always this young man whose life might seem boring on the surface, because by day he works in a factory packaging dog food, but by night he's a rebel with the devil to fight. These days, Tommy's old man don't seem to like him very much, and Tommy's parents never seem to talk, let alone touch. Tommy can't bear the silence at home. He kisses his mother on the cheek and says it's time to be grown. He gets a shitty little room in Peckham and he finds employment, working for a job's worth prick with a clipboard. It's telesales. It's okay, but he lives for picking up his pen like a farmer with a pitchfork. Eventually, he finishes his first full-length piece of work. He sends it off to a publisher. All his hopes and all his hurts are just there in the story. He really fucking hopes it's going to work. But the weeks stack up. The postman just jerks his head side to side. "Nothing today, mate." Tommy sighs deep and he goes back to bed again. Tired eyes and a grey face. Can't work out where life starts and his pencil ends. She's got a faraway look in her eye, like she's always had. The kind of look that makes strangers say, ain't so bad, love, is it? You know, less flesh, more spirit. Less chemistry, more physics. Her name's Gloria. These days, she works behind the bar, pulling pints for the locals down at Albert and Victoria. She's happy in her way. She don't expect too much from life, but she believes that everybody deserves to be treated right. She used to be a trouble type, with a look in her eyes that invited looks from the guys that she'd meet every night in the clubs that she went to with her best mate Gemma. They swore they were going to be best mates forever. They loved each other. They did everything together. They used to run riot in school, you know, a couple proper little terrors. But then, Gemma stopped calling her quite so much, because Gemma got into going protests and stuff. Because Gemma, she wanted the world to change. She was 16 and smarter than most girls her age. So while she was reading books and hanging out on picket lines, Gloria was sniffing lines and hooking up with different guys. Gemma wanted to go uni. She started studying hard, and so the two of them just kind of drifted apart. And then Gloria ran away from home when she was nearly 17. He was supposed to be the man of her dreams. He had a smile like a jewel in a sewer, knuckles like an open toolbox, eyes like Kahlua. He made her feel like he was the only one who ever knew her, and when he told a lie, nothing ever seemed truer. But one day, she was in a state in a heap on the floor, wiping the blood off her jaw, thinking, I'm sure I deserve more. See, at the time, she might have been convinced it was love, but these days, she don't think of it much. So she's the kind of girl whose scars run deep. But if she smiles at you for a second, it will last you all week. So anyhow, it's Tuesday, and it looks like rain, and the students are in, and they're talking about change. She gives them their change. The jukebox is playing the same songs that it plays every day, no change. She's thinking about, you know, making a difference, making a change, because the world seems vacant and strange. She could do what Gemma did, move into a squat and take a new name. Gemma fought riot cops and got wasted in raves on the outskirts of town, where they all called themselves anarchists, or sometimes they called themselves socialists, or sometimes they called themselves pacifists. You see, every other week they'd be camped out protesting against, I don't know, capitalism or sometimes animal testing. Gloria, she don't really go in for all them politics, even though in her heart she knows that something's really fucking wrong, but for her, life goes on. She don't have the time to damn the government. Anyway, they all talk in code. For now, she's walking home feeling lonely, caught in the grip of the cold. She steps into a bar feeling old and unloved, and she orders a whiskey and water off of somebody's daughter, and she sits in a corner feeling awkward. Tommy's out walking. He does it most nights, absorbed in the sprawl of the city. He shivers. He feels like a Spartan in Troy. He feels like his heart is destroyed. Lights on in the bar across the street, so he checks his pocket for his wallet and he pushes through the doors. He leans against the bar and he stares at the spirits, halfway between non-existent and infinite. She sat there, thinking hard about nothing at all, staring at the pictures on the wall, and she sees him walk in, all self-assured self-hatred, and she thinks to himself, shit, he's got one of them faces that makes you want to take it in your palms and stare at it. She looks away. She don't say nothing. He turns from the bar, notices her hands around her glass, struck dumb by the grace of them, desperate to say something. You see, the gods are in the theatres. The gods are on the tube. The gods are smashing windows, stealing shoes. The gods are in their bathtub, staring at that damp patch on the ceiling. The gods are in the libraries, trying to find meaning. The gods are in the chippy, now the gods are at the match, and the gods are smoking fags out the back. The gods are working late again, and now the gods are on the train. The gods are on the internet, searching for their own name. The gods are kissing till they can't breathe, wrapped in each other's arms. The gods are skipping heartbeats. The gods don't stand a chance. He wakes up beside her, and he watches the shape of her, breathes in the air as she breathes out. And the world is as vast and as small as this bed, these four walls. It's as if other than this, there ain't nothing at all. He likes the mornings best. You know, the warmth of her cheek on his chest, the light through the blinds, the patterns it makes when it falls through the room like it's drunk, the way he can find brand new parts of her body to just sit there and hang out with. Her torso expands and retracts with her breath. Overcome, he runs to his desk and he sketches a scene. The hero at peace with the queen. The editor looked over his glasses. He had a smile like a dog shit hidden in grass. A complexion the colour of marshes. He says, "Take a seat, son." And he passes a fat little hand out for Tommy to grasp. Tommy's mad nervous. All that he's ever wanted to be is an artist, a wordsmith, you know, a cartoonist. And even though he kind of hates the fact that this gross little man has the power to do it, He remembers to smile in all the right places, because this might be the chance and he's not going to waste it. He takes himself out to celebrate, allows himself the pleasure of a steak, a nice glass of wine. He's got a giggle rippling up and down the middle of his spine. You fucking did it, says his heart. Shut the fuck up, says his mind. And then Tommy gets back to his flat and he starts flicking through his sketches, flicking through the telly, sipping on a beverage, feeling like the luckiest man in the world, counting down the hours till he can be with his girl. He can't wait to tell her his news. He'll bring flowers, he'll surprise her at work, and together they'll walk home, because she makes him feel like a superhero in a way that he's never known. Polish the silverware, dust off the telly screen. It's holy hour on Saturday evening, while the new Dionysus is in his dressing room preening. The makeup girls hold their breath as they dream him into a perfect bronze and then leave him to his pre-show routine of stretching and breathing. It's one shot of whiskey, now he's brushing his teeth. Winking in the mirror, now he strides out to stage. It's fucking Simon Cowell, the god of our age. We kneel down before him and we beg him for pardon, while mothers, they feast on the raw flesh of their children, struck by the madness that floods the whole country. This provocation to savagery. So let's all get famous. I need to feel more than my peers. Give me my glory, a double-page spread. Come on, let people weep when they hear that I'm dead. Let people sleep in the street for a glimpse of my head as I walk the red carpet into the den of the blessed. Why celebrate this? Why not denigrate this? We don't know the names of our neighbors, but we know the names of the rich and the famous. So now Cowell is shaking his head. He's fucking furious. How dare this contestant have thought for a second that our precious Simon, this champion of unnatural selection, should be subjected to another version of a bridge over fucking troubled water. I stare at the screen and I'm seeing the deeds of old Simon. He took the eyes out of the heads of these people and then he blamed them for blindness. See, in the old stories, the gods walked among us. They fought with each other to save us because they loved us. And sometimes they turned themselves into animals and they came down upon us and raped us. Because they had badness in them. They had conflicted natures. You see, they felt what we feel. They were imperfect and faulted, and if we excelled, we were by them exalted. But now, all we have is distant pin-ups, untouchable, shining, politicians lying with their hands on their hearts while we gaze up at them smiling. And I think, fuck this. I don't want a man of the people to talk. I want the people to speak for themselves and love and be peaceful, or if not, then incense to anger, barbarity. What I want is humanity. I don't want this vacuous cavity ripping the bowels out of our capacity for quiet, small, excellent acts. I mean, look, there is the old man pruning his hedge again, greeting me as I walk home. There is the builder sipping his tea on the ledge again, swinging his feet to his radio and nodding his head again. And there's that couple kissing goodbye at the station. And there's that teacher inspiring the next generation. And there's that girl walking her dog. There's that bunch of kids squealing. There's that teenager standing to offer his seat to the old woman with the nice face who smiles as she sits. There's that sunlight through the window. There is peace in all this. Small heroics, everyday epics. It started picking up for Tommy a little at a time. He got a little bit of hype, a little bit of recognition. And then suddenly everything was about to be different. He'd go out drinking with these Shoreditch art guys who made money off their work. It was more than just a part-time, it was a fucking career, and it all became clear. He could do graphics for companies, save up enough, and then he'd work on his big idea. He had these new cool mates who wore clothes that were designed to look like something that you might find in the street, but they cost a fucking fortune to buy. And they talked to him about writers, artists, concept that gave him hope in his heart. And he felt understood for the first ever time in his life. And then he'd come home to Gloria, feeling like everything was going to be all right. But she never seemed quite as excited by him about the hype. And when he tried to talk about form, she just looked kind of bored and forlorn. And he'd take his new mates to her pub to wait for the end of her shift. But she'd look at them coldly, because she thought they were all talking shit. She never really liked the way they all dressed like awkward twits to disguise the fact that at their core they were really fucking arrogant, sitting there at the bar damning the establishment. And every time they said anything to him, Tommy grinned like a school kid in love. Gloria sighed to herself and got on with managing the pub. And now Tommy's got his head in his hands. They just made the deadline on that animation, a big commission for a band. And now the whole team are out celebrating. But as usual, he feels far away, thinking this was meant to be temporary, a way to save up enough to make the kind of work that I was born to make, the kind of work that sets my heart ablaze. He looks around and he hears himself talking to these fucking people. He looks down at his brogues in his chunky knit jumper and he thinks, am I one of them? Have I become that guy I despised for so long? He stood there under a feature wall, painted like a jungle scene, complete with plastic leaves that hang down from the ceiling. And everyone's laughing or nodding intensely, competing with each other in this bizarre frenzy of repeating things they've heard said before to sound more impressive, more smart than the others. And Tommy can't really bear much more. He misses his girlfriend. He wants to tell her he loves her. She's working the bar. The regulars are pretty friendly. You know, they're talking to each other, laughing at the old jokes. These are those old blokes that are too often dismissed as no-hopes. There's Sam, with the squint and a dog called Daryl, 4 legs and a head sticking out of a fluffy little barrel. Sammy has a Guinness, and he always gets one for the dog. He laps it from an ice cream tub at his feet, whimpers a few times, and then he falls fast asleep. And then there's Davy. Davy lives on a diet of chips and gravy. He's in the pub at noon, he don't leave till 11. He's got nothing better to do than sit there by the window whistling tunes. And there's Geraldine. She used to be a teacher. She hangs out with Davy getting drunk all day, reading the papers. These are good people by nature. It's just they got worn out faces. Gloria serves them happily, listens when they speak to her. A lot of them don't seem to have much else. She has a friendly face, she knows them all well. And they finish every order with, and one for yourself. Not intentional. The man Tommy's standing next to is all out of proportion. His eyes are fucking terrifying, like 2 massive cauldrons. He's tall, long straggly hair, fat thighs, dirty smirk, and he's going on and on about how much his work is worth. And he's staring Tommy in the face and telling him all about the different war zones he's visited, because you know it's like, as an artist, you know, you're naturally inquisitive. And you know, as you grow, you'll realise how important it is not to stray from your original intention. So take it from me, he's saying. I mean, it's really tough to maintain the fury and direction of your formative conceptions, you know. There's always a danger of becoming a self-parody. Tommy feels like he's gonna vomit all over this fake jungle canopy. He doesn't know who the fuck this guy is, or even if he's supposed to. What he can think of is Gloria, and how long it's been since he sat down close to her and kissed her shoulders or listened to her humming in the bath. Because when he met her, he was sure it was meant to last forever, but recently, he hasn't been able to see beyond his own misery, blind to the beauty of her nature. And isn't she perfect though? Isn't she fucking wonderful, perfect? I got too comfortable, he thinks. She don't deserve my moodiness. She deserves the best of me. Next to him, the man saying, I mean, sometimes it's true, I am astounded by my own capacity for empathy. Business as usual down the Albert and Vic. Glory's helping Davy with the crossword. Twitch, the old punk who lives in the bar, is eating a Chinese at the bar. Geraldine is serenading him with Wishing on a Star. But then these two guys roll in around 9:30. Gloria braces herself because they look out of their minds. They've got red eyes, on fire from what looks like a big binge, speed, or something much worse. She digs in her heels and summons up their energy to offer them empathy. She greets them. They stare back emptily. She recognises them, but she can't place where from. She looks away. She don't really want to stare long. She says, what can I get you, lads? And her smile is wider than skies. They're hideous, pit bull necks, dried up saliva each side of their mouths. She pours 2 ciders and slides them across the bar towards Spider and Clive. Now they're in the back playing pool. The old guys are murmuring, ain't that Brian's boy? She can hear the whack of the cue, the disc turning in the jukebox, and their cruel laughter cutting through it all. Tommy smiles thinly and he makes his excuses to that brute with the dead eyes and the too tight suit. He gets up to leave and his head's spinning, and then he feels someone grab his arm and sees a set of teeth grinning out the dark like jewelry glinting out of bed linen. Tommy, says the mouth, there's some people I think you really should meet. Tommy's sinking, blinking back a flood. He feels like an apparition, like these people won't be happy till they're drinking from his blood. She's ringing time, and all the regulars are leaving, but Spider and Clive are in the toilet sniffing. She's dealt with big, ugly men all her life, but these big, ugly men seem different. They're asking her for one more. She's telling them we're closing, but there's a place down the road that stays open till late. Spider's got his elbows on the bar. He's leaning in close to her face, saying, oh yeah, really? Yeah, is that a date? Come on, they're saying, one more. Stop being uptight. We heard all about you, Gloria. You're just our type. Their faces are twisted, eyes full of spite, looking vicious. We'll get one for you if you like. Look, she says, you got 4 pints left, and she points to their glasses. Finish them up, then I'm afraid that's your lot, lads. Why are you being so unfriendly? Asked Clive. You know us. We ain't so bad. She says, I don't know you, and I'm not being unfriendly, and the pub's empty now, and no one else is there. I like you, Clive says. You've got nice hair. And then Spider starts giggling like a child at the fair. Then he's stood up and he's went to the door. He's pulled the bolt across and he's giggled some more. And now Gloria's scared, but she knows not to show it. She knows bullies like these two feed off your fright. Clive's staring at her in the murky light, and they stand there listening to the sound of the night. And a moment passes. She can taste its passage on her palate. Their eyes are all burning and their hands are all savage. She's seen this look before. She knows where this is heading. They want to do her some damage. Come on, says Clive, don't you want to have some fun? Spider can't stop laughing, thumbs in his belt loops. Stood there at the door like a minotaur playing at a sheriff. She knows where this is headed. Tommy can hear himself saying, thanks, great, yes it is nice to meet you, autopilot schmoozing, being charming, feeling see-through. Until at last he's walking out fast, the air is cold against his face, his heart sings a name, he's running like he's being chased to the station. He finds a tube and the world is small and he is drowning. And all he wants to do is find her and have her wrap her limbs around him and save him from this world where everyone's a fucking nightmare. He's off the tube, he's on the street, he's breathing smoke into the night air, he's rehearsing his apologies, he's imagining the curve of her cheek and the perfection of her features as he turns into the street. She felt the atmosphere turning. She's known trouble all her life. She can spot it from a mile off, in the way that a smile drops from off her face. Clive's breath is so bad she can taste it. He stares at her, she stares back, the stares are weighted, as they waited for a sign that the time had come, and then it came. And Clive pushed himself upon her, eyes full of agony and shame. And she felt his hatred. She felt his hand around her throat, she felt deflated. Spider's breath was coming hard, he was watching from the door. As Clive pushed her against the bar and threw the glasses to the floor, he was swearing at her and at himself, but still she looked him in the face. She was intent on discovering some tiny trace of grace, you know, like a tiny snatch of goodness. But there was nothing, only cheeks puffing. She could feel him rubbing on her. A scream gathered in her stomach, and suddenly she heard the scream coming from her. It was for every time she'd ever found herself numb before the pounding fists of some disgusting monster. She came to life now. She found her wits. For every lie she'd been told, for every time she'd been beaten down, used and made weak, she called upon that weakness now. For Tommy's silent stares, looking past her, looking through her. For everyone who's ever fucked her over, Clive was close to her. He had one hand on her shoulder, the other was opening his flies. She felt the fury rise and stared him straight into his eyes. And he couldn't meet her gaze, but she wouldn't look away. She reached behind her head, she pulled a bottle from its place. She swung the bottle in his face and he just grinned while it hit him. Although he bled like something bit him, she swung again, the bottle smashed, she stuck the fucking bottle in him. He was almost laughing, blood bubbled at his temple. He kept grasping, eyes rolling, breath rasping. She grabbed another bottle, swung them both. He was throttling her throat. They fell to the floor, he was above her, so close she felt smothered. But she recovered her senses, kicked out with her knees, stuck the bottle in him and twisted till she felt him bleed. Tommy gets to the pub and he finds the door locked. He's gone round the back and he's knocked. It's open. He went in whistling. That's when he saw Spider by the door, Gloria on all fours, Clive on the floor. Her eyes are all forced. She lets out this roar. He sees a rage he's never seen before. He's frozen to the spot. He's summoning the heroes he used to draw, but his supermen have all abandoned him. The shock of it all has anchored him. He can't move a fucking muscle. He feels like he is dreaming. He's found himself weeping. He can hear her fucking shrieking, but is unable to move. He's stood there invisible and useless as glory burns brighter than any one of Zeus's daughters. The fight in her eyes is inspiring. He saw her, the quiet resolution, the timing, the steadfast compassion that has kept her beside him, and it dawned on him that till then he's never really seen violence. She's got Clive off her, and she stopped screaming. Spider stood still, breathing hard. She felt like she was dreaming, saw her face reflected in the broken shards. She could feel him thinking, sensed he was about to charge. Clive was muttering, and still Spider's eyes were dark and large. Then he ran towards her, and her anger was total and abrupt. She was sick of being shitted on, and she didn't give a fuck. She struck Spider round the head and stuck the bottle in his guts. He dragged her down with him, kicked her in the face, but she sprang up to stand above him and spit into his eyes from her bloodied mouth. She could feel the desperation of her lifetime coming out. It was like she was assisted by some immortal from a myth. She was silent now. She stood still, staring at them with the bottle by her. Clive twitched, while Spider whimpered like a puppy in a fire. Tommy couldn't speak, but he walked gently from the wall. She turned to see him there, feeling like she was about to fall. And she had nothing much to say to him, but they put their arms around each other. And he held her, trying to tell her with his arms everything that he'd discovered on that journey on the tube, and in that moment when he'd watched her defending herself like a fucking heroine, a god. And with his eyes he apologized for every night he hadn't kissed her right. And he knew that he was understood, because he felt her hold him tight. You see, the gods are forging on. They just want some recognition. They want the sacrificial fires to burn throughout the kingdom. The gods are lonely and they're bored of life. They feel far away and lost, and they're trying to understand each other, but they keep getting their wires crossed. You see, the gods, they get it wrong a lot, but the gods, they know their place. They create their own existence. They're in communication with the fates. Yeah, the gods are making a decision to be their own compass, because the gods are sick of living in a city full of numbness. The gods are in the ambulance, the gods are in the pub, the gods are trying hard, and the gods are in love. The gods are looking themselves in the eye and recognizing what they're worth, because the gods know that happiness has no significance without hurt. And now with shadows and rain and a man going nowhere, watching the shapes in the dark. He's got a glass full of whiskey. His mind's on the years that he ran through. He didn't know at the time how the days that he drank to would flood him and sink him when he came to be 60. But now here he is, alone in his flat in the dark with his whiskey. All his young loves have grown up to be loved by much better men. At the time he forgot them so easy, but now there was no forgetting them. And the dark clung to the trees in his garden like wet clothes, and he remembered her fully dressed in the sea, with her legs round his waist and her breasts in his face. And now here he was, all alone with his specks and his excess flesh, his bad breath, in a mess, in a state. He had a son called Clive, but Clive hated his guts for being drunk all the time when he was raising us up, because Brian had thrown punches at Clive, left him grazed, left him cut, till one night he had stayed late at a pub and had come home to find that there weren't nobody there. Clive and his mum had packed up and left. He sat down in his chair and he took a deep breath. He was a man going nowhere. What could he expect? And there was another kid too. He had had an affair. She was lovely, bright red hair, real cuddly. The type who likes to share all her feelings. You know, wake up in the morning and tell you all about her dreams. But it was all so far away now, so distant. He'd thrown so much away, just instant by instant. But he lived how he'd lived. He didn't really miss them, although sometimes he saw families together and he wished them well in his heart, but not really enough to call them. He was an old man though, no woman to bring warmth to his dirty little flat. And it made him sad to think of all the women who had loved him, who he never had the guts to love back. That was all years ago now. Still his misery deepened. And every night that went by, he would get less sleep. And after a time, he said, you know what, I can't bear this. Every day I'm getting closer to the care home, the stair lift. His memories teased him. He was lonely, miserable, days into weeks all alone, feeling pitiful. He'd resented every second that he'd spent with his ex-wife because she was never what he wanted. What he wanted was a next life. But he'd felt trapped and despondent, and he took it out on her and the kid, and he wasn't proud of the things that he did. But these days, he never even thought about it much. He said, such is life, I am what I am, clutching tight to the side of his glass like it was the edge of a cliff, getting ready to slip. He'd worked 30 years at the airport, you know, one of Her Majesty's henchmen, and now he was drawing his pension. So one day he packed up a bag and he boarded a plane, and he flew far away from his disgrace and pain. And you know what? She was lovely, she was sexy, she was young and she was sweet, and she'd smile at him when they would eat their lunch together on the beach, and he could feel himself becoming something, shaking off a life of being worth for nothing. And he knew people thought a man like him was disgusting, but he didn't care. He'd found happiness there, and even an old man deserves some loving. You see, he weren't blind though, and he weren't dumb. He knew that his money bought her kisses. He knew that out there poverty is vicious, and his money to her family made all the difference. Besides, at home he was living hand to mouth, but out here, his pension was riches. He used to spend his time in bars and pubs, where he would pour his heart out to barmaids, compensating for his lack of mates by drinking till he passed out. But here in paradise, in this fair Olympus where he'd come to live, he had a bunch of mates just like himself. He had Ian and Graham and Sid. And all of them were old English guys with young Thai girls by their side. And they would all go for drinks together, you know, sometimes motorcycle rides. And it made him feel like a fucking teenage heartthrob, like a catch, like a Superman, with his big white belly hanging over his trunks and a bottle of brew in hand. But now he sat out on his porch. The sea was flat, the air was warm. He thought back on his life and its miserable course, and he felt the unfamiliar pangs of shame and of remorse. But no dark old cloud could reach him here. He felt no anger, felt no fear. I mean, he was just an old man with a nice young girl to hold hands with. A single tear slid out his eyes, his nose ran. He thought of Clive, poor Clive, and the other one. He never knew the name of his youngest son, but he felt terrible for the things he'd done, how he'd never been there to teach them right from wrong. And he wondered what kind of things went on for them, young men now, tall and strong. And he hoped hoped they weren't as foul as him, and his heart was broken, his hair was thin, and he felt the pain of all his sins, and he thought of Mary, young and slim, dressed up nice on a date with him, and he thought of how he'd made her sing in bed together, and he ached, his flimsy morals seemed to shake and whimper for poor old Mary, and poor old Jane, and poor old Clive, and poor old whatever his name might be, and poor old me. And when I was young, all the things I hoped I'd be, I never was, but here I stand. I've done what I've done. I've lived. I'm a man. And he raised a glass to the dark skies, and he sipped his whiskey, smiling wide, and he thought of his girl with the lovely eyes, and he chuckled to himself, and he quietly died. Thank you. I'm not sure what I meant to do. I don't know. I meant to bow and go off and come on and bow again. I'm not going to do that. That's lovely. Thank you. Kind of off the point, I happen to have some CDs with me of like other stuff that I do, which you can buy if you want. And I know it's kind of gross to finish that with that, but it's needs must. Whatever. If you want to, you can have one. It's a tenner or whatever you can afford. If you honestly have only got 20p, I'll happily take that. And let's just pretend I didn't say that and pretend that we're still feeling the piece. Thank you very much for your time and attention. See you later.